team working on the SIRA initiative for West and Central Africa. And SIRA stands for what you see on the screen, which is Skills for Innovation, Resilience, and Aspirations. And while the World Bank is divided sort of between East and West Africa, just internally because Africa is so large, I also wanted to say at the beginning that we are working together as one Africa to make sure that our approaches are aligned and that we can learn from each other, just like we're all here this week together in one room. We hope to continue this going forward. What I'll do is just walk you through briefly what SIRA is, similar to what Pedro did for the Set for Jobs initiative. So again, why do we need a regional approach to skills in West and Central Africa? This is a room of practitioners who believe in this already, but just to sort of give you a few data points since we are in the last afternoon of the week, so a couple of things that maybe you can take home with you. So the 22 countries that the World Bank considers as being West and Central Africa, between 2020 and 2050, the working age population is going to double. And by 2050, the population of youth, so 10 to 24-year-olds, will reach almost 250 million. And that's 250 million young people who are trying to achieve their education, go out into the labor market, get good jobs, and fulfill their life aspirations. But even today, in 2025 where we sit, 20% of our young people are not in education, employment, or training. And many more than that are doing low productivity work. You can see in the graph at the top on the side of the slide there, just average labor productivity rates. In West and Central Africa stands at about 1/3 of labor productivity in upper middle income countries. And so we have a big challenge with that. And yes, our region has made incredible progress, very important progress on educational attainment. We have many more children in the system while the population is growing very quickly. And so that's not an achievement to ignore or to bypass. We've done a lot, but it's still not enough. As we've talked about all week, enrollment gains really need to keep going. We need to get more kids into secondary school and get secondary school and post-secondary school to be much more relevant and productive and produce students who are ready for the labor market. Because the jobs that we know that our young people want, right? We talk about their aspirations. We talked about that this morning a bit. You know, what kinds of work are they looking for? They're looking for good jobs, and those require skills. Those require more and more technical skills, STEM skills, and also the cross-cutting skills that several people mentioned this week. All of the socio-emotional abilities, all the behavioral abilities that we don't necessarily focus on enough in our education systems. And beyond that, we also know that there are many challenges to getting our kids to stay in school and learn more. In our region, we know that boys and girls face challenges, but girls especially face some particular constraints around social norms and other things that make it difficult for them to stay in school sometimes. And so overall, right, the message, and I think we can all agree because this is a room of practitioners, is that we need to get our youth to have more skills in order to get those jobs. And so we need to work on strengthening and expanding our education and skills systems. So I also want to mention here, just maybe take a quick step back to say, we've seen a lot of slides this week on how Africa in particular has this demographic dividend opportunity that no other region has. Yes, but many regions in the world have large youth populations that are demanding more and better jobs. And so that's why the World Bank Group overall has decided to make jobs its #1 priority going forward. And as part of that has come up with what we're calling a 3x5x7 job strategy. And that involves focusing on the 3 key enabling factors to create jobs. So the human capital, which is all of us here, the physical infrastructure, the policy environment, which has come up many times over the course of the week, the regulatory environment, the tax environment, et cetera, and also mobilizing more private capital, because we know that governments alone can't do it, even with the help of all of the development institutions. It really will require much more private capital. So 3 enabling factors, 5 priority sectors, and then 7 corporate targets. And I won't go into all of the detail here, but just to say that for West and Central Africa, the SIRA initiative is the coordinated skills effort that is part of the overall World Bank Group's strategy on jobs. And the same way that what Pedro presented in the East is the same sort of coordinated effort for that side of Africa. Okay, and so I'll just quickly go through sort of what is SIRA, how it will work, and then hand it over to Navranta. So what is SIRA exactly, concretely? It's essentially made up of two components. So a new generation of financing, so this idea of a multi-phase programmatic approach, which Evgeny and Pedro already mentioned, but essentially that's a new approach to financing that allows us to move from project by project, country by country, to a much more coordinated approach where we can bring countries together, bring projects together under a coherent framework so that we can stay together for the long term. Rather than a 4, 5, 6 year project, we can be together for longer than that. We can be together across multiple countries and really try to make sure that our financing is having the most impact that it can have. And the second part that complements that is what we're calling a knowledge platform. So that's essentially the effort and the investment to do things like we've done this week, which is coming together, talking about the issues that matter, learning from each other as practitioners in the skills and education space. So those are the two key elements of what SIRA is. And so how does SIRA work overall? So I mentioned this idea of an MPA having a framework. The SIRA framework is really focused on trying to address the supply and demand constraints for education and skills. And not just any kind of education and skills, but the private sector, job relevant type of skills that we're trying to develop, because as Pedro said, the goal is not training in and of itself, it's jobs, employment, dignity, income, and development. And so just quickly to walk you through this framework. The 4 pillars that we've focused on are first, schools. So at the core of it, schools, the formal education system still matters a lot. And like we said at the beginning, in West and Central Africa, we have a very important unfinished agenda in basic education. So here it's about expanding and increasing the quality of secondary education at the same time, and especially with a focus on the parts that will be job relevant. So I think it was Boris who asked in the morning for people to stand up who thought that secondary education in their country prepared young people for the labor market, and I don't think very many people stood up. So the idea with this pillar is really to try to do both those things at the same time. Expand and raise quality with an eye towards relevance for the labor market. The second pillar is, of course, certainly skills. So beyond sort of traditional secondary education, we all have our skills building systems. So that's not just formal TVET, although yes, formal TVET is a very critical part of it. But beyond that, to all of the skills development that goes on in our countries. So everything from agricultural extension services to economic inclusion programs to large-scale work for cash type programs that we have. These are all opportunities to build skills for young people and help them be able to earn more going forward. The third pillar is society. So all 4 of the pillars start with the letter S, if I didn't mention that before. But again, here, this is about focusing on the areas where we sometimes have barriers to young people being able to access education and skills programs. So dealing with social norms, trying to shift behaviors, trying to reduce economic constraints, making sure that everyone has access to these opportunities. Xiaoyan mentioned before the importance of inclusion, and others did too. So that's what the society pillar is about. And then finally, of course, systems. We can never forget our systems. So that's everything from figuring out how to do those public-private partnerships that we've been talking about this week. How to do them well, how to do them so that they return value for money. It's about the kind of skills ecosystems that have been mentioned multiple times. So at the national level, how to coordinate, but also at the local level, how to support and build those skills ecosystems. So these are our 4 pillars: schools, skills, society, and systems. And importantly, again, this is the overarching framework for the MPA. Each country that will be in the MPA will identify where their main constraints are, right? Because nobody can do all of this, and no one should try to do all of this at the same time. The idea is to have a sort of overarching plan and then pick from here what is going to be key to start with for each country. Okay, and so finally, what is our ambition? So for those of you who are familiar with World Bank projects, which I know many of you are, our development objective is there at the top. So it's increasing young people's acquisition of job-relevant education and skills and their access to jobs. And if we are able to do our jobs right, then we'll see that in these indicators that are here. So we should see more students in secondary education, more of them completing it well, more students in formal TVET, informal skills programs, and more of all of those students working in productive jobs at the end. And our goal, if we're able to, over time, reach the 22 countries of West and Central Africa, we hope to reach at least 28 million young people through these targets. And of course, many of you in this room would be involved in those efforts, so hopefully we will be working together going forward, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Melissa.